Many of you have worked with Jean on a number of programs and will know how, well, inspiring you are, Jean. I'm going to let you introduce yourself because you do it better than I do. Welcome, Jean. It's lovely to have you here, and over to you.
Thanks very much, Claire. Am I connected? Is that all right?
You're connected and you're ready to go. And as soon as you want your slides, you just tell me and I've got them ready to go.
Oh, aren't you good? Thank you very much indeed. Okay, so let's go to the first slide then, please, Claire. This is a nice little PowerPoint presentation, which I think will get recorded so we can all look at it again. So this talk is entitled something like The Significance of Doing Research. And there you go. And the next one is looking at flowers. Now, I don't know about you, but I'm a very keen gardener and I just enjoy being in the garden. It's very therapeutic and it's great fun. And it's lovely, loveliness. Even weeds are very pretty, they're just misplaced flowers. There are millions of flowers, but if we go to the next slide, please. It's important to see each flower as its own entity. And you ask yourself, what's special about each flower? Now, it just so happens that I've got a tray here of geraniums. They're going into the garden shortly. And they are called geraniums, so that's the generic name. But if you look, each flower is special, it's individual. See that? And if you go into your garden, each and every flower, each and every entity in your garden is individual. Back to the slides. You ask yourself, well, what's special about each flower? Next slide. If you look, here you go. Each flower has its own form. It's individual. It may look like other flowers, but it's an original. And by saying it's an original, the implication is it never existed before, and it's never been duplicated out of all the millions and billions and trillions of flowers in the world. Each one is unique. And if you look down at the bottom, it's just like the animals and just like humans. And it's just us. Next slide. What's special about each one of us? In the whole of creation, each one of us never existed before and we never will again. And this means that we occupy our own personal space on Earth. And it also means we have a responsibility to use that space well. It's a responsibility. And this, by implication, means doing something like action research. That is, being clear about what we already know, finding out what we need to know further, and taking appropriate action to come to know it. You know, ever such a lot is written these days about action research. And a lot of people now see it almost as a technique to be applied. But it's in its original sense, the idea of doing action research is that each person takes action in their own space, in their own context, and they're not applying anything, they're doing. So it's that important understanding that research is not about applying techniques, it's about doing your research and developing understanding as we go. Let's go back to the slides, please. Two important authors have got this to say about the topic. Lovely authors, Arjun Appadurai, who says, it's the right of all people to find out those things they need to know that don't know yet. In other words, do research. That's what research is. You don't know something, and heaven knows all of us have millions and millions of things that we don't know. We do know some things, and they're very important things. But look at the universe out there that we don't know. Look at the garden that we don't know. So that's what Appadurai has to say. It's the right of all people to find out those things they need to know, but don't know yet. This idea was very relevant during the Gulf War. If you remember, let me just find the, Donald Rumsfeld. I'm reading this quote, and you can find it by looking on the internet and looking for Donald Rumsfeld. Look up known unknowns. That's what you look up on the internet, known unknowns. And he said this. He says, there are known knowns. These are the things that we know. We also know that there are known unknowns, the ones we don't know that we don't know. And this latter category tends to be most difficult, and it is. There are things that we don't know, and we don't even know that we don't know them. And that's what makes a very important field of inquiry, and something I think that all of us are demonstrating this morning, that we go into a classroom, we don't know what's going on, we don't know the history, we don't know the people, and yet we learn and we find out. And that's what action research is about. We're finding out all the time. There'll be space after this for discussion about some of these ideas. Let's go on to the next one, please. And the next. Oh, sorry, stay there. Noam Chomsky, another famous author, you can find him on the internet. He's got this lovely take on the scenario. He says it's the responsibility of intellectuals to know things. They find out and then take responsibility for how they use their knowledge. Now, each one of us is an intellectual in the sense that we think. We don't just do thoughtlessly, we actually think, we use our intellects. Noam Chomsky talks about the chap who mends his car, who fixes his car. And he says about that mechanic, he says he is an intellectual because he's actually using his head to find out what he doesn't know. And the mechanic knows an awful lot more about cars than Chomsky does. Although Chomsky is world famous, he acknowledges that the mechanic in that field is much more intelligent and much more intellectual than he is. And I'd agree with him. There are so many things we don't know, so many things we don't know that we don't even know. And we're always reliant on other people to help us out and to find those kinds of things out. Now, there are very serious implications to this. Looking at the PowerPoint, it becomes the right and the responsibility of all persons, including us, of course, to find out what they need to know and then hold themselves accountable for how they use their knowledge. And this means us. Now, that last point is really, really important. is the idea of holding ourselves accountable. What's been so inspiring listening to colleagues this morning has been that each one actually demonstrates these qualities. They show that they have exercised the right and their responsibility to find out what they need to know and then be prepared to hold themselves accountable for how they use their knowledge. Each and every one that we've heard this morning has taken on that challenge without articulating it necessarily, but it's there. It's there in the way that they are and the things that they say. They take on the responsibility that they have found ways to improve whichever aspect of their work that they're doing. They've got feedback from learners and from other colleagues, and they can show how they are holding themselves accountable for how they are using their knowledge. And I love that idea running right through everything this morning, is that we're using our knowledge wisely. That's us. Next slide, please. There are lots of implications here. It becomes the right and the responsibility of all persons to, one, be aware of what they don't know, but need to know. Two, find out. And finding out means doing research. Doing research. At the beginning, a lot of people get very worried about doing research. They say, oh, I can't do research. Oh, I'm not a researcher. And that's poppycock. Because as soon as we say something like, how does this work? Or I don't understand this, how can I figure it out? Or even very basic things like you go into the supermarket and say, well, what should we have for tea tonight? I need to go and buy something. That's research. You can have different levels of research. You can have basic levels of, low-level research, but then go on to very high-level research. And we've seen everything this morning right across the board. We've seen very high-level quality research from colleagues here. So the steps: one, be aware of what we don't know, but need to know. Two, find out by doing research. Well, doing research means finding out what we don't know. And use what they find out, which is new knowledge, purposefully. For example, by taking action, doing something about it, and then hold themselves accountable to themselves and others for how they use their knowledge. And this means us, is knowledge acquisition and knowledge use, and it carries an ethical mandate. And we've heard that right through this morning, and no doubt we'll continue to hear it this afternoon, because that's the whole ethic of this kind of program and the kind of people that we're with. We're aware what we don't know, what we need to know. We've deliberately found out what we need to know, and we are using our new knowledge purposefully by taking action. And you can see that in every presentation. This is an analysis of what people are talking about, what people are doing, and it's so good. It's so good. And then being prepared to hold yourself accountable to yourself and others for how you use your knowledge, because it's got huge impact. And this means us. Knowledge acquisition and knowledge use carry an ethical mandate. How we use our knowledge is so very important. It's ethically directed towards the good of other people and of their planet. And next slide, please. Further, with strong relevance to action research as a methodology. If action research is about doing, which is the action piece, and finding out, which is the research piece, and I've put in a reference where this is outlined. It's also the responsibility of action researchers to anticipate potential outcomes. Now, this is the tricky bit, because you read a lot that action research is about doing all the time, doing. But doing without thinking in advance about what might be the outcomes is quite dangerous. It's a question then of you act before you think. And that's not very good. And if you follow that through, next point, it then becomes a case of holding ourselves accountable for what we do and the decisions that inform those actions and potential outcomes. So doing things, action, is not just about physically doing things. It's about mentally anticipating what might be the outcome, what might happen because I have done this. How might other people react? It's a very big responsibility. And it's nice, it's lovely to see those ideas implicit right across what people are speaking about, what they're presenting. And last point on that page, this has special implications for teachers, especially, next slide, it's a teacher's responsibility. It's the responsibility of all of us to know what we know, to know what we don't know, and know how to find out what we don't know but need to know, which is doing research and what kind of research and where to find the information. Know how you'll use that new knowledge when you have it. And think carefully about the potential impact of the use of your knowledge. These are deeply informed ideas and deeply informed responsibilities. In the presentations we've heard, people are doing this. When you come to write it up in the scholarly journals, in your books and other outlets, remember those profound aspects to what you're doing. It's not just about doing stuff. It's about thinking in terms of well-being. These are the motivations that are behind all of our actions. Next slide, please. To avoid falling into the trap of just going and taking action willy-nilly, perhaps the main thing is, wherever possible, to talk with others before taking action and imagine potential consequences. Now, obviously, there are situations where you can't do that. You know, if you see a child about to walk into the street, you grab them and pull them back. But in especially community areas, and when we're working with other colleagues, it's very important to think about what might be the consequences of whatever I do. This is new knowledge. That's part of the whole business of doing research. It's about creating new knowledge. And when we think about taking action and the potential consequences, that second bullet point, we commit to our new knowledge and we use it as well as possible in the interests of other people and of the world. Next point is, we've heard some lovely research. We've heard people making claims to knowledge. They're saying, we have done this, we know what we've done, we can account for what we've done, we show how we hold ourselves responsible, we know what we're doing. If you can't say that as a teacher, you shouldn't be a teacher. You know, all of us know what we're doing, and we do know what we know. When we do research, looking at the words on the slide, the power of research is in finding out those things we don't already know, but need to know. That's research, it's about finding out. And it's also in the legacy your knowledge leaves for other people. They learn with you and from you. And even when we're not here, they feel our influence. When you think about the number of learners you worked with, how many? 100, 200, 500, right through your professional life, difficult to judge. And just think, each one of those persons is influenced by you, and they're going to pass on that influence and that knowledge. It's a huge responsibility, but it's also tremendously exciting. Because look what you can do in that last bullet point. We learn together to live together for planetary well-being. It's planetary well-being as well as our own personal and collective well-being. The next slide, please. The responsibility now is to pass on the knowledge. And just like the flowers, we become the collectives that have a real exercise, a real force for good in the world. Like all good researchers, I got my slides mixed up, and I think if we go on to the next slide, please, there's an important message here. Those are the references. You can find those on the internet, and do have a look at them because they're well worth looking at. And please go to the next slide. I'm contactable, so please do contact if you would like. Most important for your projects here, contact Claire, keep in touch with one another. The quality of the work that we're doing is terrific, and it's very, very impressive. And well done you, well done everyone. It's a privilege to be part of it. Thanks a million. Bye.
And it's a privilege to work with you all, Jean. Thank you for bringing that right into the frame. And there's lots and lots of chat in the message boxes for you, just to say how you can inspire people with your words, and you do inspire us. Think for a moment. I'm going to pass over to Andy in a minute to take us forward towards our lunch break. And Andy's going to build on the idea of planetary well-being by thinking about our well-being through action research. Jean, once again, thank you. Everyone, take a moment. Andy, are you ready to go? I've got your slides here for you.
Lovely. Yes, indeed. Thanks very much, Jean. It's great following Jean in some ways because it's so inspiring, but at the same time, I feel like the act that had to follow Queen at Live Aid. You know, it's sometimes a little, yes, how can you continue this level? And the way I've tried to continue the level of thought is by, I've picked one of Jean's flowers to illustrate what I'm going to do today. I'm CPD research lead, and I've got the best job in the world because I get to read everybody's projects. I get to read the proposals, then I get to read the projects. And one of the things that was so apparent to me this year was the level of well-being that comes through all of the projects, the sense of well-being that comes through the projects that I've read. So despite all the frustrations that there have been this year, the people having to continually ditch their plans. They ditch their original plans, then they have to ditch their revised plans, continually refocusing. But through all this, the action research activities seem to trigger a tremendous sense of well-being. And I've realised this come out in the projects in a great sense of what I would call professional pride. Have we got the slides? Yeah. So well-being, I've realised, is viewing life positively. So we've got a real pride in having the identity of a good teacher who's finding out how to be a better teacher and making a difference in learners' lives. There's a huge sense of professional resourcefulness. So it's not just having new resources that you have to use, such as new technologies, whether it's Teams or Zoom or goodness knows what, but it's having the wisdom to use that resource in the interests of the learners. And as well as that, throughout the projects, there's also a sense of professional purpose, the really positive attitude driving you to keep improving what you're doing, find ways of doing it even better. So I began to look up what actually makes for well-being. And as I began to research it, the simple place I came back to, which was very appropriate in the circumstances of the pandemic, was the NHS web page. And that recommended 4 main aspects. Well, it recommended 5, but the first one was physical activity. And there's no way I can align what has been done to the physical activity, but the other 4 things they came up with were really important. And the first one that they came up with is learn something new. And everybody over this past year has had to learn something new, quite often as a form of coping strategy or adaptation. But what was great about the projects was that people were taking new ideas about how to use the technology. They weren't just dumping content online, but they were really exploring what challenged, what engaged learners, how to maybe chunk content down, how to use it in preparation, other ones used it in consolidation, how to engage solitary individuals into group work activities. So all these things constitute a form of new learning. And the second tip that I got from the NHS was connect with other people. And paradoxically, at the time of isolation and separation, the action research approach of getting learners to participate and give feedback on their project was really worthwhile. Teachers were beginning to connect with individuals who they in some ways had taken for granted in the mainstream. And these learners were quite often hidden in normal teacher-facing class activities, but who responded eagerly when they had the opportunity to give feedback to teachers in one-to-one sessions, and away from peer pressure. They really flourished and took the opportunities to connect. So we see a reciprocal well-being, not just teachers feeling good about what they're doing, but also how liberating this must have been for learners who might have been wallflowers, throughout their career. And as well as this, you could also see connections with other members of staff. A lovely quote from United Colleges Group this morning. Teacher, 20 years experience, I've written down. Taking part in this collaboration has changed my life. So that's fantastic. So we've got teachers collaborating with each other, teachers finding learners, and mentors working with teams. It's been great. So all of this, you can see where the well-being is coming from. And the third thing that they suggest is important is to actually give to others where possible. And in some ways, this is typical of teachers. And what action research actually does is that it builds on the teacher's natural altruism. What it does is, through action research, we see that it draws on teachers' generosity of spirit by giving them better ways to walk that extra mile for their learners. And so it's no wonder teachers feel good about what they're doing. You know, if this is what they can do, they can use their research, their new identity to try and help those, to make a difference to those people who come into further ed, often looking for a second chance. The fourth thing and the final thing which they recommend is to be mindful, to live in the present. And I've never really thought a lot about mindfulness in the past. It seems like it ought to be a good thing. But then I began to realise how action research is a mindful activity in itself. It encourages teachers to look and listen more carefully to the learners. By investigating more deeply and by holding the lessons and the moments to scrutiny, by investigating what's actually happening rather than delivering a teaching and moving on to the next lesson and it'll all get sorted out in exams. But by listening to what's happening, looking at what's happening, we become more aware of ourselves and we become aware of the effects that our actions have on other people. And when we become aware of that, we can change it. And that's how we live in the present. We learn from the past and we influence the future as we become more aware of learner experience. We start operating at a higher level of consciousness altogether. So that's what I've concluded. Wellbeing is about having a positive purpose. And as I say, it's evidenced through the professional pride, resourcefulness, and purpose that helps shape our lives and our learners' lives. But I think we have a challenge going forward. You know, let's delight in the well-being it's created. And I have a big worry. And my worry is, after this year of pandemic, when we go back in September, the government seems quite keen on re-establishing everything back to normal. And that normal, are we going to go back to the old normal? I know Boris is in favour of making things better by adding to the length of the school day. So instead of building things better, he's going to build more of the old things that don't work very well. And the real challenge is you've done so much in so many ways. You've listened to learners who were hidden and discovered, you know, hidden away, undiscovered by normal teaching. So you've found them. You've got lots of good one-to-one activities. You've got lots of ways of learners giving feedback. How can you retain that? This is the challenge to be thinking about over lunchtime. How can, and beyond and for next year, how can we keep this going, what we've got this year, when we have the satisfactions of seeing learners again in groups? Can we think of all the things we've discovered this year and make them complementary, not as alternatives? So we're not looking for the right way to teach. We've found some damn good ways to teach this year. Can we integrate them with the good ways that so many of you had already? That's the challenge. Can we come up with a new normal that's a better normal rather than go back to the old normal? I'm sure you can do. Yeah. I think we've got a few minutes, so if you have any questions, I should imagine you'll probably have questions for Jean that she might be willing to listen to and answer for a minute or two, or to myself. How do we work these few minutes, or are people bursting to get to the toilet?
I'm thinking that how wonderful it was that all you said, Jean, about taking personal responsibility for the space we inhabit, as then Andy about how this is good for us and it's good for us all, that has left me thinking, what can I be discovering next? What new things do I need to know that I don't know yet? And how this is going to help me to feel good in what will always be difficult. It's going to be difficult for a bit longer, eh? It's not all over. We're still challenged. So over the lunchtime, have a think. And Andy posed a nice question. Can I share the question that we were going to pose for you in breakout rooms, but we want you to think about it while you're eating your lunch. So here's a question to think about. In what ways has your understanding of how learners learn best changed over this project? What have you learned about what we do, about our professional practices? What have you learned about yourself? So it's all on your Menti, so you can go in there and have a look at it anytime you like. But I think it's time to take a break. I know Jean and Andy are both very open to questions. So there's a couple of minutes. Has anyone got a burning one? You think, I need to ask this before we go for lunch. Does anyone want to call out or say anything? I know it would take a brave soul to do that in front of 107 people, but if you have something you think, oh, I'd just like to say that or ask that, then you can. I'm looking around my room and Simon modelling making some lunch, which is getting all our stomach juices going now. So thank you, Simon. That's very good.
I'll add something, Claire.
Go on, Gail.
One of our lovely people this morning in the mass group said, it's all about the love. And we all knew what she meant. And I think that was really nicely reflected in what's been said in the last session.
Susie, go on.
Typed it in the chat. I was just going to say, any tips for getting more colleagues enthused about action research and colleagues that maybe don't engage in this deeply?
Do you want to try that, Jean, or shall I?
Go on, Andy. I've got some thoughts too. Go on, and well, Jean, if you want to.
Yeah, I think, it's all about the love. And I think, so I think it's about, if you've done something interesting, ask them, would this be any use to you? Not, this is the way to do it, but could this possibly be any use to you? Or how do you think I could improve on this? If we respect and value other colleagues, and believe me, your colleagues will actually know far more about your research than you do when you ask them, because you've been looking in one way. You're broadening things out. Ask them, and once you invite them in, teachers love being asked for help, because I don't know if you've ever, I met somebody in 1989 who asked me what they should do about education. They didn't tell me what the answer was and what teachers ought to be doing, and I've always remembered that lady. Ever since, she said, what should I do in my teaching? And she asked me, she didn't tell me what I should do. So ask people for help, show you value them. I think there's nothing better. You see how much you've got from your learners this year. Think how much you'll get from your colleagues.
And Bob, I saw your hand was up. Have you got something to add to that?
Only just to say a very practical idea, really, which is to make sure we share the video recordings of the presentations. I've read the reports on all of my projects, but nothing beats hearing the project leads just talk from the heart about their work and the individual learners. It really moves you, and you get a real glimpse of what drives the projects. And so as much as the formal reports are needed, I think just hearing teachers talk about what they've learned really does help to motivate and inspire us all to get out there and to continue to do what Jean has encouraged us to do, which is to keep an open mind to what we know and what we need to know, and even those areas that we don't know yet.
Hear, hear, and watch this space this afternoon for some more ideas about how we can inspire others and widen our community even further. So I'm going to leave that dangling, and if we don't stop soon, Simon's soup is going to spoil. So I think that that's a good moment for us to say it is now time for a break. We're going to be back in our workshops, she says, checking out. Yep, we're back in our workshops after lunch. Workshops start at 1:45. As you know, there will be people in this room. If you get lost, it'll put you in the right direction, and go and have a lovely break. If you can get outside, all the better. And we really look forward to this afternoon. And we're going to be joined from the other side of the world this afternoon. So watch this space for more. We're part of a global community of action researchers, and that's super exciting. So we will see you at 1:45 in the workshops. Bye for now, everyone.